Okay, so welcome back to the channel, and in today's video I have another reaction video, and it's to one of the series called The Look, which was made by a filmmaker, and his name is Jeremy Newson. Unfortunately he died, but in 1992 he made a series of like fashion films called The Look, where he focuses on different aspects of the fashion industry. So he's done one on Yves Saint Laurent. I've done kind of like reactions to some of the ones he's done. So the one today I'm doing is one he made which is about runway shows at the time. So without further ado, let's get straight into it.
4 times a year, the high priests of the world of fashion prepare to mount a spectacle.
Yeah, I realise you'd like to see the show, but unfortunately I can only give to key people. Not key, I mean I understand that you are important and everything, that you'd like to see the collection, but unfortunately I really cannot give you a seat for the show. I have to give to fashion editors first, and because you're not a fashion editor of a key publication, I'm sorry, but you cannot come in.
Their name's a litany of late 20th century style. Jean-Paul Gaultier, Gianni Versace, Giorgio Armani, Ralph Lauren, Karl Lagerfeld, Issey Miyake, Calvin Klein, Yves Saint Laurent, Gianfranco Ferri, Vivienne Westwood, Valentino, Lacroix and the rest take part in rites which curiously celebrate the opposite time of the year. For 3 weeks in late autumn, the fashion industry celebrates the rite of spring and summer. And for 3 weeks in the spring, they celebrate autumn-winter again.
If it's March, it's fall, and if it's October, it's spring. It's very simple.
It's cold outside, it's raining, it must be spring again.
Ready for Ivana Trump. Here we go.
In January and June, in glitzy Parisian hotel salons, with an audience perched on gold chairs, they celebrate haute couture, expensive, hand-stitched, one-off creations where the whole notion of designer clothing had its origins. In October and March, it's ready-to-wear, the collections destined for stores, boutiques and the general public, shown to an audience sitting on plastic seats in huge temporary marquees. Haute couture is glamorous, extravagant and loses huge amounts of money. But it's a lost leader. Excited media attention keeps the designer's name before the public and helps sell the profitable licensed products like perfume which bear the designer's name. And 4 times a year, the top acolytes of the fashion world come to bear witness to these designer collections. A frenetic round of hundreds.
Let me just pause it there. See, this is why and it sounds like really, I don't know, like, oh, I'm so big. Not really. This is why I don't like going to fashion shows unless I know like there's a definite way of me being able to get in or I'm invited, because all that fighting, that I just don't have the energy for that, like fighting to get into a show. I'd rather stay in my house, like genuinely. Like I have no problem staying in my house, in the comfort of my house. I don't know why people leave their house to fight and jostle each other to get into show. I just never understood it.
Hundreds of shows at the fashion shrines of the world.
You could spend your entire life going to fashion shows. You could just go from the, Rome ready to wear to the Milan ready to wear to the Paris ready to wear, the London ready to wear, the New York ready to wear, the Tokyo ready to wear. Then it would be time for the Rome couture, the Paris couture, then the menswear starts. I mean, never mind Dusseldorf and Frankfurt and, and now Madrid.
Unlike traditional rituals.
To add to the point he just made there, considering like now, because this was made in the 90s, there are even new fashion weeks that have propped up, whether it's not new but like prominent now, like Tokyo Fashion Week, or Copenhagen is a really big one that's not like one of the 4 capitals, fashion capitals of the world, but Copenhagen is like becoming a really important and a really good fashion week event. And then on top of that, now we have things like, pre-fall, pre-spring, all these resort pointless collections. So yeah, genuinely, if you wanted to just go to fashion shows your whole life, you could.
Which reaffirm or celebrate life's certainties, the rites of fashion celebrate change. From one season to the next, nothing must remain the same. And at the cutting edge of change, 4 times a year, designers must work miracles, resurrecting the blouse, the skirt, the trouser, the dress, the coat, and a score of accessories, and present them to a congregation of hardened professional spectators. Every season, there's a new set of commandments on color, skirt length, cut, fit, fabric. The costs of a typical runway show are lighting, music, hairdressers, ushers, dressers to help the models, professional pressing, house photography, promotional film and video costs, glossy invitations for the glitterati, bijou breakfasts, press dossiers, security for the dresses, free designer perfume, set and catwalk building costs, models on average, all jammed into a large steamy tent, rent $38,000, total cost almost $200,000. And it's all over in 40 minutes.
I'm so glad they talked about the price of runway shows in this, because I think a lot of people don't understand like how expensive runway shows are. A lot of people are like, oh, it's really nice, but the lookbook was boring. Like, it'll be better if they do a runway show. But like, a runway show is really expensive. Of course, not every runway show is going to cost like $200,000. That's maybe for like bigger brands. But it's still expensive. If it's costing someone who's trying to make ends meet $50,000, it starts to become a bit of a liability, because you're not going to gain a profit from that. So yeah, I think it was just good, because a lot of people don't understand how expensive it is. And even now, because back in the early 90s, social media wasn't really a prominent thing, and that's when this documentary was made. But now there's even like social media marketing. If you're going to do like a, say, I don't know, a production or a runway show, and then you have to get these specialized cameras if you're going to do a live feed. And there are other expenses that aren't even accounted here that are added now that we're in 2021. So yeah, I think that was a really good thing to point out.
The Temple of Fashion is not open to all comers. Only an invitation, carefully scrutinized, will unlock the doors to the inner sanctum. If you're out, you're out. But if your budget for designer clothes runs to around $100,000 a year, you'll be most welcome afterwhere.
I just saw yesterday Christian Lacroix and today Dior, tomorrow Ungaro, and probably
Okay, Ivana.
afternoon Chanel.
Let me just pause it. Ivana Trump is really, really stylish, I must say. I know she's like high society, and to a lot of high society people, I'm not sure they care about style, more so just using clothing as a way to like show their wealth. But in her case, yeah, she's always been like really, really stylish, in my opinion anyway.
Yves Saint Laurent, I have to be back in because I have to be back in south of France, so I'm probably not going to come.
You're in, obviously, if you're the editor of a glossy fashion magazine, a major supplier of fabrics, or a buyer for a huge department store. The annual pilgrimage of fashion students whose ingenuity at getting in matches only the exasperation of the designer's PR trying to keep them out.
Oh yes.
I rate that guy's hustle. This guy climbed over like a wired fence. No, you have to give it to him. Shout out to all the students who, including me, who try to finesse their way into fashion shows.
They nick the seats. You've got, I mean, the whole contingent of St Martin's College of Art go over with the absolute aim to get into these shows. I mean, that is it. Life or death, they will be in those shows. And they will not only be in those shows, they will be in the front. And they will not only be in the front, they will be backstage afterwards with the designers. And not only that, they'll be drinking the designers' champagne.
After 4 hours standing in the rain...
Shout out to all the fashion students drinking designer champagne. That's hilarious. That's so funny.
There's a mood of anger and frustration amongst the photographers. Why are they treated like the enemy when they're vital to the whole enterprise? Camera crews rush to stake out the best vantage point, tripods as territorial markers. Veterans put them on guard duty the night before. As the crush outside reaches dangerous proportions.
You're an absolute animal!
As the fashionable fight to get in, the thin veil of civilized behavior threatens to tear. What these people look as if they'll die for is a seat, and not just any seat, a good seat.
You see, this is another thing that I could care less about. You know how, like, I think they're probably going to get into it, but I'm just going to guess that they're going to start going into, like, where you sit determines, like, your hierarchy in fashion, like, your importance in fashion. It's things like that is what leads to things like the elitism that is so rife in the industry and those sort of things. I think it just breeds that sort of behavior. And this is why I could care less about these fashion shows. Like, honestly, if I was to be really frank, like, fashion journalists, a lot of them don't get paid a lot. And I would probably earn more money sitting at home talking about runway shows from the comfort of my bedroom, maybe a few years from now, when I have like a bigger audience, than being a writer for a big publication. And it's just more convenient, it's easier, you don't have to involve yourself in like the elitism and the hierarchy of the industry and fight with people to get into shows. Yeah, I don't see what the appeal is. Obviously, I love going to fashion shows. It's fun. It's always good to experience it firsthand. But like fighting people for seats or being spiteful because you think you're bigger than someone else or you're more important than someone else and they're sitting closer to the runway than you. It's just, I just do not care about that stuff. I don't know why people care so much about that stuff. Personally, I think it's really childish. And the fact that a lot of the journalists that fight for these seats and involve themselves in this hierarchy are literally 40, 50, 60, 30 years old. At a certain age, you expect people to be like more mature, but I guess not.
The seat is good because of its location. It's a precise indicator of your place in the fashion hierarchy. In this, as in any other ritual, proximity to the altar, in this case the catwalk, is key. In some barbaric rituals, you have to fight for your place. Every show has its pecking order, each designer and their PR a notion of who is most important to them. The moment of truth. PR, public relations officers, guardians of the designer's public image, relate to their public.
Perfect.
Perfect.
And you?
Everything was well.
Valentino's Carla Souza charms the wealthy customers.
Exactly here.
Yves Saint Laurent's PR for England.
Hello, how are you?
Lindy Woodhead mother hens the top media.
All right, I heard and read that you got hit. It's getting more dangerous around here.
And then he hit me.
The urbane Paul Wilmot spots a celebrity and gives her the PR peck.
The PR peck.
At Vivienne Westwood's, eagle-eyed Carl singles out big spenders.
These two ladies have seats.
Buyers.
From Harrods.
Thank you.
They're all important. They must all be accommodated. Thus, the seating plan at a major collection is a political map of the entire fashion industry and a PR nightmare.
This is A. B is there. Excuse me, madam.
Getting it wrong can be embarrassing. A childish game of musical chairs or an intricate...
I love that Jeremy Newson, I'm not sure if he's the one narrating or not, but whoever's narrating said a childish game of musical chairs. That honestly describes like all these like people in the fashion industry, like fighting for seats and jostling for position and power. It's like, you're 50 years old. You are 50. You should be way more mature than this. It's crazy. So I like the fact, because I love it when it's not just me. Like, I like the fact that he used the specific word childish to describe it, but yeah.
Jostling of power politics. The most powerful members of the fashion industry guard their hard-won positions jealously.
You can take 20 or 30 years to get to the front row seat, I can tell you.
When I was struggling out when I was in Paris, when I used to sit in the last row at the collections, I did say to myself, damn it, I'm not going to be sitting in the last row for the rest of my life. I'm going to claw my way to the front.
Let me just pause it again. Why is it so important to these people to sit at the front? I just don't get it. I don't get it. Obviously, John Fairchild is like big in the industry, really important. But just in general, it's not even about John. Why do people care about sitting on the front row? If you're there, you're there. Who cares? I think to get rid of all this rubbish, I think designers should have a list of like people who they want to invite like they normally do, but it's first come first serve. So the first person to the runway show gets to sit wherever they want, and if you come late then you sit at the back. I think that would be more fair, and it won't create the sort of spite that is opened by, I don't know, someone like Anna Wintour coming 1 second before it ends just to prove a point and then getting to sit at the front. Either way, I don't know why people care so much. I will never care about this sort of stuff. It's just like, I grew up in Lewisham in London. There's like more important things to life than where you sit in a runway show. It's just so mundane to me, but yeah, whatever.
I remember when I arrived on the scene and I had never written about fashion before, and suddenly I was the new boy at the New York Times, and I was getting first, second, third row seats. And I do remember having that feeling that there were eyes boring into my back with heat-seeking lasers, saying, who is that little cur and what is he doing in that seat? It should be mine.
Oh, yes, it was awful, it's criminal. And you think, how on earth did she get to sit in the front row?
At Chanel once, the fashion editor of women's wear was not given a front row seat because somebody for Vogue pushed harder.
I know one fashion editor who did call a PR after London and screamed, how dare she be put in the second row.
See what I mean? This is what I mean by, like, a lot of people in the fashion industry are overgrown kids. How can you be an adult and instead of being put in the front row, you're put in the second row, and then you call PR to shout at them, how dare they put you in the second row? That to me is the most childish thing ever. Like, it's so childish. Like, I would not... The fact that people even know that that happened is embarrassing. Like, if I was that person, I wouldn't want anyone to know that I called a PR shouting because I was put in the second instead of the first row. That's embarrassing. That's childish.
The irony of it is that the front row seating at these shows is actually the worst and most impossible seat. You can hardly see anything because of the mountain of photographers in front of you.
Exactly. You can't even see anything when in your front row because of all the flashes from the photography and, like, all those things. So in actual fact, it's not the best seat to actually see what's going on. It just makes people feel like they're important. And this is why I don't care about stuff like this, because then it makes you ask the question, are they there to actually take in the clothing that's on the runway? Are they there to kind of, you know, look at the clothes? Or are they there because they just want to feel important because they're in the front row?
And you're kicked and jostled and shoved, but, you know, that's the ritual of fashion, and that's where they sit.
Newspapers, it depends on what they wrote last season. If they did a good article and something very special, then we try to put them on the first row.
And for a bad article?
Third row.
I have gone, like, in some shows, back and back and back, and I can almost just about wave.
That definitely still happens now, even though this was made in the early 90s. And sometimes brands go as far as to ban journalists from shows completely. So there's that. Like, Eddie Slimane is known for banning journalists for bad reviews, which, once again, kind of childish, but whatever.
All the other British press. My mother used to say to me as a child, if you can't say anything nice, Larry, don't say anything at all.
What you're dealing with is between 1,000 and 2,000 people in the same business who, for 2 months a year, are forced to sit in close proximity to each other in hot tents, day after day, hour after hour. They're all forced into this horrible little petri dish where all kinds of cultures and diseases breed. And so you see, you know, a year's worth of vituperation and anger and jealousy and hatred and love and
spite and vindictiveness and revenge. Iconoclasts can easily find themselves temporarily excommunicated. John Fairchild banned from Yves Saint Laurent for featuring Christian Lacroix's first season on Women's Wear Daily's cover. Lowry Turner banned by Versace and Lacroix for less than complimentary reviews. Carrie Donovan banned from Valentino for calling his loyal ladies China dolls. Susie Menkes, last-minute reprieve from Versace. Of course, designers actually need the press. 600 buyers, 1,800 journalists, 300 photographers.
As a designer or creative in general, you should be open to criticism. So I don't see why you would ban someone because they gave a bad review. If anything, you should be happy that they're trying to be as objective as possible. I don't know. I think if you're creative and you're not thick-skinned enough to, like, take constructive criticism, because I'm very sure people from these type of publications aren't just going to bash you, like, with no reason or meaning. Yeah, I just think it's really childish just to ban someone because they didn't, you know, say what you wanted them to say. I don't know, that's just, man, the industry sometimes just pisses me off.
It's all in pecking order, though the doors are never closed to some, however late. Time's running out, things are getting fraught. Backstage and front.
Guys, ça va pas là.
Quand je suis arrivé, c'est pas du tout le monde.
Allez. Oui. This is my case.
Non, ta caisse, non.
Yeah, I've been here for 3 hours.
Non, c'est ma
This
place.
is my case.
C'est ma place, c'est ma place. C'est pas ta caisse, hein.
Mais non, c'est ma...
D'accord?
No, this is my.
The aptly named Pigpen can be a photographic hell on earth. Hours of waiting, jealously guarding a tiny piece of floor space.
This just seems like a whole lot of chaos and stress, to be honest.
Chris is extremely civilized. He comes in 5 minutes before the show's about to start and beautiful smile. He says, "Hello, where's my place?" And everybody else reacts in total rage.
It is very like a village church because certain people occupy certain pews and you always know where everybody is going to be, and there is a hierarchy and there are definite characters and they are the same year in, year out.
Watching the same designers performing the same rituals. Dior, Gianfranco Ferre's seasonal offerings to the gods of luxury and big spending. Jean-Paul Gaultier, at 40, the oldest enfant terrible in the business, dresses icon Madonna, then cleverly tones things down for the shops. Giorgio Armani, the maestro of minimalism, whose creed less is more applies to everything except the price tag. Gianni Versace, the king of excess, for whom less is less, believes in sex, rock and roll, and shopping. Valentino, the romantic Roman, expensive, slinky clothes for the shiny set. John Richmond, after dark, clubland sleaze and streetwalking style prowl the catwalks of London. American mega designer Ralph Lauren reinvents the past and sells it all over again to the present for billions of dollars. Irreverent postmodernist Karl Lagerfeld, the hired man at the House of Chanel, who schlocks up the classic Chanel look with endless permutations. Bright colours, brocade, bullfights. His native Provence inspires the vocabulary of Christian Lacroix, the first new couturier for 25 years. Moschino is the joker in the pack, laughing at the fashion system. And the best part of the joke is the fortune he makes making fun.
Doesn't that remind you of Vetements? Moschino. It kind of reminds me of Vetements. Laughing at the system, but the only thing that's really funny is like how much they're making laughing at the system. That sounds very much like Vetements, just saying. So Vetements essentially is the modern day Moschino. Even though Moschino still does that, like Jeremy Scott, he's still doing that, but yeah.
Avant-garde, anarchic, OBE. For some, Vivienne Westwood is one of the world's great designers. For others, she needs her head examined. Caramba frills from Oscar de la Renta for the ladies who used to lunch and now do charity balls. John Galliano, ripped and shredded, underwear as outerwear, with his old business in tatters now making a comeback. Issey Miyake, marching into futurism, the human form clothed in high-tech fabrics and industrial innovations. Yves Saint Laurent, the flower of French fashion, the tortured genius who season after season struggles against time and infirmity to live up to his illustrious past.
Sonia Rykiel, I love her.
4 times a year, these designers fight for the attention of the fashion coterie. A headline and a single picture in a mass circulation journal could bring the attention of millions. Every moment must provide an arresting image. With only a few seconds to capture a twirling, strutting model in color and black and white. To have every item in focus and correctly exposed, in case that's the one the paper or magazine calls for. Press photographers are the worker ants of the industry, struggling in a massively competitive and overpopulated world to survive, trying to make a stable living from the fleeting moment.
Do you know what I just thought of when he was talking about like photographers and having to take images, the right images? In the 90s, it must have been so hard to be a photographer because I'm guessing that most photographers back then shot in film. And depending on what film you're using, which 35 has like 32 exposures, or if you're using medium format, that means max you have 32 or 64 images that you can take, and then you have to change the roll of film. So they must be so good at changing the roll of film fast, because if you have to change a roll of film like midway through a runway show, you could miss so many looks, like lose so many images and lose so much money, because then you don't have the images that all the publications want. So yeah, that must have been a tough job compared to now. Now we just have digital cameras that can burst for 10,000 pictures in a row, so that is not really much of a problem. But if you're shooting in film and then you run out of exposures and then you need to change your roll of film midway through a runway show, that's a disaster. Yeah, that's just something I thought about.
Once upon a time, there were anonymous, lowly paid house models trained only to walk gracefully and turn. Today, there's the supermodel.
Some girls just never can quite walk, you know. I mean, you know, they tend to clump. I guess they can learn, you know.
Few of them, they are extremely beautiful, but they are not, I mean, the best when they walk in their own way. But they are so beautiful, so photogenic, and such a great pleasure for the photographers. Then suddenly, when they appear in their own way, the photographers, they become crazy, they just photograph this girl.
And that's the whole point.
I should think that set them back a penny or two.
It did. This quartet of supermodels set Gianni Versace back almost $100,000. But it's an investment.
And you were always aware of that, and you know that you were chosen because you know the designer knew that you could sell. You know, his inspiration to the customer.
Women think, wow, I have to have that outfit. Men will come flocking after you.
So this is an amazing point they brought up in terms of supermodels and why they came to be, because I think now you have supermodels like, I don't know, the Hadids or the Kardashians. I'm not sure if you can call them supermodels, but models anyway. And it's not, because I know a lot of like fashion purists are like, they can't walk properly. We've just seen Valentino talk about how supermodels, it's not really about them walking, it's the fact that they're so beautiful, deemed by a lot of people, by society's beauty standards, I guess, that they sell really well. And at the end of the day, fashion is a business. No matter what anyone says, art, all this stuff, the goal of fashion is business, is commerce. People are trying to make money. It's a business. Even Comme des Garçons, that's really artistic, is damn near $1 billion company. This is not a joke. This is not all fun and games. So designers will do things that make them money. So if using certain models, because of how they look when you take pictures of them, when people see imagery, then they will value that over just someone without a name or an audience, you know, walking on the runway. Now, I think this has kind of developed from the 90s. From the 90s, it was just about your look, your face, and that was what sold. I think now in 2021, because this documentary was made in the early 90s, now we have social media on top of it. So now it's not just about like how you look, it's about your audience, how big you are, how many eyes you can draw to the runway show or the brand through your social media pages. So I think that's even another added layer. And considering where fashion was going in terms of models, it only makes sense that eventually went to it just being about who's the most popular girl. Let's just put the most popular girl on our runway. And that's just basically what it is right now. So yeah.
Miles a year, they're the critical interface between designer and consumer, constantly having to reconcile designers' whims with customers' tastes and pockets. This is real life, the business, factory lead times, tight margins, competition for exclusives, knockoffs.
Clients think that it's so glamorous, you coming to Paris and Milan, going to the shows. Your place is usually taken, and in front of you, you see all the cheap designers who are going to have whatever you've just seen out on the high street within about an hour from when you leave, and they're sitting in a better place than you are.
Opposite the buyers, the press block, casting the media's magic eye on proceedings. Fanning the flames of desire, millions of readers with billions to spend are waiting for the word from the style pundits of the world. Can the press make or break collections? Well, Donna Karan once had 5,000 suits that stores buyers ignored. But when Carrie Donovan of New York Times Magazine featured them, the suits sold out the next day.
It's funny because right now people think that like magazines, glossy magazines are like dead or dying. Maybe magazines like fashion specific magazines, but things like the New York Times, never. I remember I was working for a brand that I won't name because like confidential information, and I was in a marketing team basically, and there was a dress that never sold and we were trying to sell it, and then New York Times did a feature on the brand, and they just seemed, I don't know, the journalist who wrote the article seemed to like the dress that never sold, that we wanted to get sold, and they put it in the article and it literally sold out just because it was on some random article in the New York Times. That is the power of like some of these like press places. So it does still work, because when I'm talking about was like 2020, that was last year, so that's very recent. So yeah, magazines aren't as dead as people think they are, but that is the New York Times. New York Times obviously has a lot of influence, of course.
As Donna Karan said, every one of them the very next day. And when Vogue declared it the year of the dress, it was the year of the dress, the best-selling item across America.
Oh, that's a really important thing. So at Central St. Martin's, I did a project recently that was about the future of Vogue and just glossy fashion magazines in general. And for it, I interviewed a lot of like industry experts, from lecturers to people that work for Vogue, getting all different information. And something really important that I found out is Vogue is such a powerful magazine, which is why I'm saying these magazines aren't dead yet, like the way people think it is. But Vogue is so powerful that they can determine what designers make almost. So what Vogue can do, for example, is say in 2022 the narrative they want to push is yellow dresses are the it thing. They have the power to kind of get the most popular and most important fashion designers for the biggest brands in on their idea, and then that's why each brand, you'll see them making yellow dresses. That's all come from Vogue, who's saying, we're going to write a story about yellow dresses this year, we're going to make yellow dresses the thing this year, so if you want to be a part of it, I suggest you make a yellow dress. And obviously everyone's going to make a yellow dress because brands always want to be the it thing in the now. And then Vogue is going to run the article as if they're so smart and they just noticed that yellow dresses are the it thing, but actually it's all been orchestrated. So yeah, that's literally the power of some of these publications. It's crazy.
I write 80,000 words a year about fashion for the Herald Tribune. I'll climb to the highest loft, I'll go down in subway stations, I'll go anywhere to see a fashion show, if what you see is worth it at the end.
And you hope Susie Menkes thinks it is worth it. With her highly targetable and wealthy readership, if she thinks something stinks, buyers may think twice about ordering it. American Vogue's editor Anna Wintour, known as Nuclear Winter for the power she wields, or Winter of Our Discontent for her ice-cool demeanor. She's the most powerful woman in fashion publishing, and the models know this is the place to stop if you hope to be reflected in her shaded stare.
If we really feel that a collection was not good, we just simply don't include it in the pages.
For designers, a fashion fate worse than death. The glossies represent a world of aspiration and illusion, where advertising and editorial fuel the fantasies of a buying public. Also playing a crucial part, celebrities.
Celebrities are important because they come free to a designer, and by sitting them in the front row, when they...
Celebrities definitely don't come free to a designer. If they're coming to a show, maybe, but when celebrities are in campaigns and stuff like that, or they're like a muse for a brand, no, they're paid a lot of money. They definitely don't come free now. I'm not sure about the 90s, the early 90s. I wasn't even born then. I was born in 97, so I wasn't even alive when this documentary was even made. So yeah.
Appear in magazines and newspapers all over the world. It is a seal of approval for that designer. If you talk to people in the street, they're more likely to know who Eric Clapton is than who Armani is.
Recent tours by Eric Clapton and Elton John yielded more column inches on their designer clothes than on their music. There's no such thing as a free seat. The wealthy American ladies who lunch but scarcely eat, and European aristocrats justify their presence by spending up to $40,000 on a single couture outfit. It's their patronage keeping alive the dying art of couture, the so-called laboratory of fashion, where 1,000 hours of hand stitching in a single unique garment gives fashion that vital patina of exclusivity.
The magic of fashion are the moments that everybody remembers, the moments when you sense a change, when you feel, whether it's the shock of the new or just some kind of shiver of change that goes down your spine. That's what all fashion people know and understand. And that's what we're looking for.
Will spiraling costs mean the end of the runway? Or are backers, buyers, designers, journalists, as well as consumers locked into an inexhaustible...
Over 10 years later, runway shows are still happening. Even during COVID, people are still making runway shows. So I think it's going to be a long time before like runway shows permanently go. So it's crazy that in the early 90s they were asking the questions that we're still asking in 2021. And this is quite interesting because my lecturer at Central St. Martin's, well, one of my lecturers, we were talking about sustainability, and she was saying that she finds it kind of strange that everyone thinks that sustainability is like a big thing now, because people talk as if like everyone just wants to be more conscious now in 2020 and 2021 especially, and the industry is moving to be more sustainable. But she said like in the 80s people were doing like being really sustainable and trying to move to being more sustainable, and then the 90s came and it was all about glamour and people forgot about sustainability, and then sustainability started to pick up. So she's quite skeptical how long the interest in sustainability will last, which is quite sad that we just love to virtue signal in fashion, but history tells us that these things all come and go in waves.
The ritual of change. The runway show may be over, but the real work now begins as the media and the buyers begin to play their crucial role as fashion's go-betweens, marrying desire, design, and dollars.
I have yet to meet a fashion editor who's ever said, "Oh, yummy, the collections are coming up." We all hate it. Now, part of that is sort of being rather blasé about it. Oh God, it's so dreadful, not another glass of champagne.
When I finish, I have to go back the same day to New York and fly back to Los Angeles to do a cover.
Going to 10 runway shows 4 weeks in a row, tiring, to be fair.
To see all the American shows. Sometimes I can work all night. I'm happy. I'm happy.
Since I am a lady of leisure at this moment, I'm going to come because it's great fun. It's great theatre. It's great entertainment. And it's free.
There's no such thing as going home and thinking about it from see it on Monday and they must have the order by Wednesday. It is not easy.
There's a whole bunch of people buying clothes, basically.
I'm already in the middle of the next ready to wear. I hate to stop things. I'm born to go ahead.
The next day, I get a call from a trade paper and it says, "Ralph, what do you have for us for spring?" And I just did fall.
Anyway, we're going to stop there because it is a long document. It's like an hour long. If you want to watch the full version, the link will be in the description below. But let me know your thoughts. I thought it was quite fun just watching this through and reacting to it. Let me know if you like reaction videos. On that note, like this video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And of course, if you want to support the channel, you can do so via Patreon, and the link to that is in the description below. But on that note, I'll be back with another video very soon.